everything you need to know about products and services that can improve your life. This is Experts on Call on CL 650.
No, you're not alone, 'cause I'm gonna make this place your home.
That's Home by Phil Phillips. What were their parents thinking? Let's name our son Phil Phillips. We're on StrataLife talking about property management, looking after strata buildings. The show's called StrataLife. Dan O'Hearn is here with me, president of Key Pacific Property Management. And the last segment, we heard from Kim Wallace, vice president, design roofing, and Alex Limongelli, public sector manager, waste management. So the last couple of segments, we've talked about waste management, we've talked about roofing. Now, Dan, to you, we're going to bring it all together with some of the questions we have here. So what role does a property management company like Key Pacific play when it's time to replace a roof? Do you advise and say, okay, it's really time now? What's the process?
The process might start years and years in advance, right? The corporation recognizing that the roof needs to be replaced in 5 years out. Obviously, the more time you know, the better, and that's the advantage of something like having a depreciation report. It recognizes that. We would, as we get close, certainly talk about funding all that time, get a scope of work together. We most of the time, we wouldn't do it ourselves. We would have outside consultants to do it, whether we're dealing directly with a contractor or getting a certified roofing association member to do the scope of work. Call for the SGM or the AGM, put together the meeting notice, the resolution, get that passed and authorized, start the collection process of the money, and then make the payments to the contractor and keep an accounting of all those expenses as well.
You must have conflicting people inside those meetings because some people want to sell within the next year and they want the roof to be put off for a year. And then you've got people who want to get it done because they live on the top floor. How do you handle the human element of this?
I have an expression. Our job would be easy if people didn't live in the buildings. The buildings give us no grief, and I like to think that difficult people make us better. You certainly learn from them, but that is always the challenge. You think about it, you have a building that's designed to last probably 100 years, filled with people who have funding models of 1 month at a time in mind. People don't usually plan on moving in a building and living there 50 years and taking care of it. You might do that with a family home, but often not a condo. It's very transitional, so that's always a struggle. And
most of these roofing replacements, special assessments, when it comes, or there's enough money in the contingency to pay for the roof? Typically.
Well, if you started your planning well in advance and you have a depreciation report, one of the funding models may be putting enough money aside each and every month so that in 10 years or 20 years, when it comes time to replace the roof, you just cut a check out of the CRF. But it's not been our experience that people really want to do that because they plan on moving on in 5 years.
And they want their monthly payment to be as low as possible.
Exactly. So we'll help coordinate all that, and then sometimes there'll be additional charges, because this is a big project. So some management firms will either charge a flat rate or a percentage, or in our case, we often charge an hourly rate to help do all this coordinating because it is extra work over and above day-to-day management.
Is it typically the biggest repair to a building that you, outside of the whole leaky condo thing that happened over the last 20 plus years, is it the roof is the single biggest cost typically? It's
interesting. I mean, you might have a building that comes with an envelope restoration, so that's often going to be exceeding the cost of a roof, elevator,
but it's one of the most
elevator replace, but it's certainly up there. Oh yeah, definitely. And it's certainly the most anticipated frequent replacement.
Yeah, it's the obvious one for people who live in Vancouver. It rains.
Yeah.
All right, here's one for you. Say you have a strata building that has commercial units on the main floor, and you see those in places like Kitsilano and places where they've got, or many parts of Vancouver where they have retail on the main floor, and that's what we're starting to see now with units above it. And the commercial units don't feel that they should have to pay for the roof levy. What do you do there, and who is responsible?
Yeah, I mean, we always have that. The residential guys don't like what the commercial guys are putting in the garbage, and the people on the ground floor figure they don't have a roof, and the people in the penthouse figure they don't have a foundation.
So that's the back to the people. Buildings would be great.
And despite what the people feel, it's the strata plan that makes a difference. So if you're part of a strata corporation, the corporation has to maintain the common property of the corporation, and on the strata plan, you'll usually see a big C on the roof, which means it's common property. And so though you don't have the direct benefit of the roof, even the guys on the commercial and ground floor have to pay for the roof.
Or whoever owns the whoever owns that unit. Maybe not the person, the tenant in there, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a unit entitlement expense. So the
whole building is involved, whether you like it or not, right?
Yeah, based on the strata plan. I mean, there may be something out there that's going to be slightly unique, but 99% of the time, it's going to be common property.
All right, so you
Is it
get
your
it.
recommendation to buy in a building that has commercial as well, or better to get a building that's just a building with no commercial? Is there a big difference in terms of?
I haven't seen a big difference, and to address that years ago when the new act came out, they created sections. So now that you can have a commercial section and a residential section, so they work more independently, because some of the conflicts in the past would have been an entitlement to the CRF or bylaws and that sort of thing. So now those two can work very independently, but collectively they all share the exterior of the building, the envelope and the roof.
So it's pretty much the same then.
Yeah, you got to really examine the budgets and look at the CRF. Yeah.
All right, so as a property management company, you help them and you have that annual general meeting, for example, and you get people together and you approve a budget for the roof to be replaced. But then when you start pulling the roof off, there's maybe some rot or things that need to be fixed, and it goes above the budget.
Yeah.
So what do you, you're the bad news bearer then when you have to come in and say, hey, listen, they're going to have to get more money. What do you do in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, those things can happen, and ideally, you address this even before it happens. You go to your roofing contractor and say, okay, what are the outside numbers of this? Because Kim probably wouldn't be on the roof telling us these are, but certainly
the roofing guys would like if you showed up, I'm sure.
I go to roofs every week.
Okay, good.
Yeah, you don't look the stereotypical roofer. No.
Yeah. Well, boss is here. They stop swearing. Yeah.
But they're going to walk across it and say, you know what, this area is soft. This area has we have concern that the substrate or the decking is rotted here, so you should have an allowance for this sort of thing.
So when you have a budget, say we'll pick a round number.
Yeah. $1 million.
Okay, right. So do you have a usually budget 10% more, 20% more?
It's going to, I don't know, that's a good question for Kim. It really depends, I think, on the age of the roof and what you're expecting, right?
It depends on a lot. There's some roof systems that we can know ahead of time that there's going to be a lot of rot or going to be a lot of wet fiberboard or insulation. Other ones, there might just be small sections once we start tearing off. So depending on the roof system, I would say 5 to 10% of an allowance. They should always have that. And if at the end of the day you don't have to use it, that's great, but you should be ready.
I've got a totally different question for you. Apparently it rains in Vancouver. I've never seen it myself.
Really?
So when you're in the middle of winter and you've got a major leak and it's you're in there, you're repairing or you're replacing the roof, what do you do to make sure that everybody doesn't get wet? How do you cover everything up?
Well, we wouldn't tear off a roof if it's raining out. That's the first thing. If often we do a lot of emergency leak calls.
Right.
So it'll be pouring rain out, all our trucks are out fixing leaks. So our goal then is to stop the water. So there's different products we can use is to stop the water ingress. And then so we do a temporary repair. Then when we get a dry day, we go back and do a permanent repair. For replacement, you just plan out your schedule based on the weather.
But what if you've ripped the roof off and you're halfway to replacing it and the weather changes?
Well, you only tear off a certain amount each day. So let's say it's calling for rain that day, you wouldn't do it. Or if it's calling for rain later in the evening, you'd only tear off a small section. So it's just all about planning.
As a former weatherman, you probably cursed me on many times.
Yes. Well, we have a team of people that discuss it every morning and come up.
Everybody talks about the weather.
Oh, yeah.
That's the number one thing.
That's got to impact your business, Because sometimes you have projects that need to be finished and all of a sudden Mother Nature says, hello, welcome to Vancouver, right?
There's only so much you can do. We've come up with different ways over the years to help be us more flexible in the poor weather, but sometimes if it's raining, it's raining.
It's raining, yeah.
All right, we're going to switch gears and talk a little bit about waste management and garbage. So what do you do with people who are just basically saying, I'm going to throw out what I like, whether it's a television or a computer or a sofa, what have you. So, that's an extra cost that is going to be billed back to the strata if it's something that's not supposed to be in there, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Alex touched on, first of all, you got to educate all the owners, right? You got to make sure that, your rubbish room has to have all the proper presentation material, make it very clear where everything needs to go.
And you do have a lot of self-policing in buildings. There's always
it's all self-policing.
Somebody's going to rat you out if you catch them throwing something in there that shouldn't be in there.
Not enough. Now, one thing that's very effective, make sure you have bylaws, or at least the rules are very clear on what can go, what's the consequences if something is like a mattress, sofa is put in place. Make sure your bylaws have provisions for the Privacy Act and use of cameras and fobs. We put an end to sofas with cameras and fobs. And 1 hour late, or you're in the garbage room in the morning, in the afternoon, there's a sofa there. Let's check a look at the camera and fob, and then when you contact that person, say, you got to move.
That's really expensive. If you had to put cameras in every garbage room, it becomes a big
Most
expense.
of the new buildings are wired for it, though. So it's I think that installation was under $1,000.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and how much does it cost to throw away a sofa, right?
Yeah.
So it was very quick recovery, and when you have a conversation with somebody and say, I think you put your sofa there, and they deny it, say, well,
They go in with their hoodies.
we'll show you something. Well, and that's where the fob helps, right? Well, it's someone entering with your fob.
But a lot of this stuff is, if you don't have the fobs and the cameras, is just the education part.
Education is huge.
Because ultimately, if you can be fined, right? The strata can be fined?
Yeah, and I think what people feel, they're anonymous, right? So the corporation gets fined, but the individual doesn't. And, this is a community. And
a good idea is to have like spring and fall cleanup events where you just get a waste management company to just bring a larger bin, and then you put signs up and say, throw all your stuff in the bin at these events. And so because there's a way for them to get rid of it, then it tends to kind of eliminate the illegal dumping. And cities are doing it. Surrey is doing a big one in
the Surrey is kind of known for it. It's if you don't leave anything on your front porch because someone will take it away.
Well, now Surrey is doing a big event on Saturday where you can take anything, and we've got 20 bins in there. You can take construction debris, you can take appliances, couches, wood, you can take anything, and they do it for free for residents to eliminate people dumping mattresses on the side of the road, which is horrible.
I was driving through the Stanley Park Causeway over to the North Shore, and there's a mattress and garbage in Stanley Park.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Yeah,
that's
come
ridiculous.
on, class it up a bit, right?
Yeah, exactly. At least leave the bed too.
Matching set
for the joggers.
Okay, one more here. When you get into replacing a roof, as we mentioned, is a big ticket item, and you have a special levy to help pay for it. How do you force people to pay? Like, how do you get them to get their money?
We got to answer that in a minute?
Yeah. What's your 1 minute answer to that?
You're talking about people who don't pay?
Yeah.
Well, there's it has to be enforcement. It's basically they have to pay just like they pay maintenance fees. They get a demand letter, a requirement to pay within the 14 days, or they can try to dispute it. Liens get registered, and then a collection process. And there's all the costs associated with the payment of the levy, the interest that the bylaws provide, the fines and penalties, and the collection process, and the lien process is all tacked onto that. So it ends up being very expensive for people who don't pay, and it's a slam dunk for collection.
Okay. When we come back, we'll kind of go around the horn and see if anybody wants to talk about roofing, waste, property management. This is CL 650, and you're listening to StrataLife.
This is Experts on Call on CL 650.